Well, what's up, guys? Ryan here with the DFS 5-pack. Had a couple extra minutes this morning, so I want to take a few minutes and I want to talk about how to get better at the NFL Showdowns. I play them on the Thursdays and the Monday night games and like the London game over Sunday, for example. I don't usually stick with the Sunday or the Sunday night games because I'll usually play primetime then, but had my struggles the first couple weeks as well, and it's been going well since then. So I figured hopefully we can work on strategy a little bit today, and that'll help you guys be more profitable when coming to play the Showdowns, since they are still pretty new in the grand scheme of daily fantasy sports. All right, guys. If you are new to the station, though, you know the easiest way to get more DFS videos, press that red button that says subscribe. We come on here, talk baseball, basketball, and football. As per always, we do sincerely appreciate the kindness out of your hearts to press that thumbs up button. Next up, if you want the full breakdowns, all the videos, if you want the write-ups at the end of the day for NFL and NBA and then baseball when it's back around, just go to the website, sign up to join the team. We'd love to have you. We got different price packages for everybody that should work. Now I want to talk about this captain mode, the showdown mode for DraftKings. You know, we're only really, in the grand scheme of this, less than 2 months into it. I know we had the Super Bowl showdown. I played it, don't really remember the results of how it worked out, but it felt really uncomfortable, really clunky, and really new the first couple of times I played it. Again, on any small slate like this, there is going to be some luck involved. You got to get your touchdowns and everything like that, but it is still really new in the grand scheme of things. So I think working on potential strategies, and we got a few of them, is going to be a help and improve the game with most of the players out there. So for me, the struggle was real the first couple of weeks. I think the first 2 weeks, I'm pretty sure I went 1-3. Didn't really feel comfortable with my formula for setting lineups correctly or how to properly game strategize for it. So I looked a lot like this guy right here, and I wasn't really quite sure how to conquer him throughout the first 2 weeks, but I was playing slow. I was playing light. I wanted to make sure I got a pretty good feel for it before I felt more comfortable playing for a little bit extra. You guys know I'm not a huge money player or anything like that, but at least something that you could notice within your DraftKings account. So a couple of showdown points. Again, I stick to the Thursday and Monday games, plus like London on Sunday morning. I stuck a few dollars in that one, but I slept in too late to really enter more lineups like I wanted to, or enter more contests like I wanted to. I stick mainly to cash games, and I will enter several of them. I'm going to go through mainly the larger $25 double ups, just because I think those give you a pure placement statistics, versus when you show like the 23-person ones, they can be massively different because of the lower number of people in them. So we'll stick around kind of showing like the larger single entry 25 double ups and where he finished and things like that. Again, started off 1-3, since then 11-1, and not to make excuses, but the only loss that I had was the Kansas City Denver game. I had Sammy Watkins like 50% of the field. He left hurt with 0 points. I lost by 2. I like to think that if he was in there, that probably would have kept the winning streak going. It didn't. Can't cry over spilt milk. There's plenty of times you win when somebody else loses the guy. So just take it for what it's worth. I think a big point and something I had to work on early, I think when I was losing games early on, I wasn't really sure how to address the captain spot. And I think I was searching too hard for a big money player to return big value, and spending a lot of it on that captain spot, and then getting a lot of crappier players to subsidize that into my remaining spots. And it wasn't working out for me. Now the strategy has shifted a little bit. My big thing is get all the best players. If that means playing somebody cheap in the captain spot, don't punt it completely and play like a $200 guy. But if there's a value play, like Monday night, I liked Ito Smith. He ended up not having a great game, but I put him in the captain spot. And because we were able to get all the other important players, it still became a fairly easy W because of that. So I want to get the best players, even if that means not getting a real quality guy in the captain spot. And of course, Matt says this all the time. It's slate dependent. You got to evaluate each slate on its own in order for that to be helpful for you. Some slates are just going to be different. You need to have different strategies. You got to be able to move. One thing I hear in DFS all the time is people hear a little rule and they get married to it. One example might be in football is if you're playing a quarterback, you got to pair him with somebody. It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't in my eyes, especially within cash games. If you're going for major upside, I get wanting to go with a quarterback and maybe 2 receivers, hoping you guess the touchdown passes right. But I find people get like married to this one idea, and they feel like they have to do it. DFS is slate dependent. You could have different theories for different nights and different games. All right. So the other thing I like to remember, it's harder to give advice on these than it is to play it, because I can't go out and give all 6 people. There's significantly too many people who watch the videos to do a full lineup. Not only is it just not something you're supposed to do, it would kind of ruin the game a little bit. We'd end up with way too many ties. So if I come on here and give out 4 guys and then we do lineup review the next day, and one of the guys that helped me win is one of the ones I didn't mention, it's never on purpose. I just want to hopefully most people believe me when I say that, but we never sit here try to hold in info. We're trying to give the best info. It's just sometimes, it was your 5th guy is the one that blew up and caused you to win. Maybe it wasn't your top 4 guys. We can't just come on here and only talk about or bring up every single person that needs to go into it. So we're trying to give the best advice. Some days, though, it's your 5th play is the one that wins you the money, and it's not brought up, but it's never intentional. All right, so let's go through the last 5 lineups, and just if I can pick out any quick points about this one. So this goes back to something else I brought up. So when we did the video for this one the other day, we brought up Ito Smith, Saquon Barkley, Odell Beckham, and Sterling Shepard. As you can see, I played all 4 of them. I didn't know exactly who I wanted to put into my captain spot, but I knew I wanted Ito Smith, Saquon Barkley, Odell Beckham, Matt Ryan, and Sterling Shepard. Those 5s to me were a lock. Who the 6th guy wasn't too sure. I settled on the Giants kicker only because he'd been around for longer. That was a bad choice. Should have gone with the other kicker. But once I knew which players I wanted in there, I had to play around with who I wanted in the captain spot. And really the only guy I could play was Ito Smith in that captain spot in order to afford Saquon Barkley, Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard, and Matt Ryan. Saquon Barkley at 94%, you can tell this was just, I wasn't getting away from it. He didn't even have that great of a game and still got 26.4 points because of all those receptions. That was kind of a no-brainer. When we talked about Odell Beckham, I said with Odell, knowing how bad the Falcons defense is, I'm scared not to play him because of what his potential upside is. He had a big game with 8 receptions, 143 yards, and a touchdown. That's why I played him. It was tough to win without Odell Beckham. A lot of people, he's only 32% owned. There's still people who won without him, but it was tough to win without him. Matt Ryan, again, quarterback for a good offense. No real rocket science here. And then Sterling Shepard. Falcons, I was actually surprised Shepard wasn't more highly owned. Falcons are really bad against number 2 wide receivers. So to me, that was kind of a no-brainer. Again, he wasn't that highly owned, but hopefully y'all used him. So I decided on that core, and that's where deciding on Ito Smith in the captain spot came. Instead of picking out the captain spot first, look at the core group of players. Who could potentially cost you? The only guy that I couldn't play that I would like to have fit in here was Julio Jones. And because he doesn't score touchdowns, and I expected Atlanta to be winning as opposed to trailing, is why I kind of went with Odell Beckham over Julio Jones. You knew he'd be solid, but I thought I had enough exposure to good players right here that I could go without him. And Julio had a fine day, so if you played him, he wasn't the reason you lost, but that was just kind of how I viewed this one. All right, next up. This is Tennessee versus Chargers. This was the London game Sunday morning. Wanted to play for more because I really liked this one, but just couldn't get my butt out of bed that morning in order to put it into a few more contests. So we'll just go over the $5 double up because it was the bigger one. Out of the handful I played, I had to play a bunch of the smaller ones because I literally woke up 5 minutes before the game started and I just didn't have a chance to enter into a bunch of them. So if you watch the video on this one, it was a smaller viewed video because I didn't get to do it until like 2 in the morning. I bartend about once a week and just to get out of the house. And I did that the prior night, so I wasn't home till really late. But it was all about game stacking the Chargers. Because the Titans' offense is inept and there really isn't anybody that is a go-to on there. Now, Dion Lewis was popular and he was just fine. But the whole thing was, and we came out here and said it, was Phillip Rivers, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Tyrell Williams. You know the Chargers will score points, so I want to get exposure to them. Because there wasn't any really good mid-tier guys, like I wasn't scared to see fade Dion Lewis. Didn't play him. He actually did better than I expected, so that wasn't great, but I wasn't scared to fade the mid-tier, so I got to put Phillip Rivers up in the captain spot, knowing that with no Melvin Gordon, he was basically a lock for a good game. As you can tell by his 96.3% ownership, everybody was in pretty good agreement on that one. Was able to fit him in the captain spot because we had the money. I looked at like Ryan Suckup, Chargers defense, and a couple other low money guys is just as good for production as the mid tier guys. So in this event, I got to pay all the way up to Phillip Rivers, who was such a safe spot for money with Melvin Gordon. He's going to be throwing. The money pick was Tyrell Williams, and if you guys watched the video, I said Tyrell Williams is the guy who's huge play capable, and he did it on the very first play. I think it was like a 75-yard touchdown. I said I don't want to skip him because he could easily occupy 1 to 2 Chargers drives with big plays. And if he does that, this is going to take away from Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler, which it did, but I want to game stack the Chargers and make sure I get their points because that they're going to score. Whereas none of us would have been surprised to see the Titans score 6 because their offense just isn't very good. All right, so last Thursday night, we had Cardinals versus 49ers. This game didn't work out at all like I expected to. This is one where I was just happy to end up in the money. David Johnson was the top play on the slate beforehand. As you can see, he was 91% owned for a reason. This is just how bad the Cardinals are. He had an awful day. The way this slate broke down, I was able to get him into the captain spot, thinking he was going to have a big game. I know a lot of us thought he'd have a big game. Turns out the Cardinals suck just that much. So he was pretty terrible. I obviously chose the wrong defense with the Cardinals. I thought this would be kind of a drag them out, low-scoring game. Turns out the Broncos got worked. The money from this game came down to Emmanuel Sanders. I didn't expect to win this one. I don't check my scores till late. I just assumed Emmanuel Sanders would be right up there at David Johnson, close to 90%. Fortunately, he wasn't. So that was a very, very good thing. And that just talks about exposing weaknesses. We know that Arizona has an elite number 1 corner in Patrick Peterson, who will not spend a ton of his time in the slot like a lot of elite number 1 corners who follow. It's not that he never goes down to the slot, but he tends to focus his time on the outside because it's easier to put double team on guys in the slot often. We know that Case Keenum loves to throw to the slot, and Emmanuel Sanders has just been better than Demaryius Thomas this year. I assumed Sanders was going to be highly owned. He was highly owned at 2/3, but not nearly as high as he should have been, in my opinion. So that was kind of the money pick right there. My last pick of the day was Larry Fitzgerald. And there was a bunch of guys I wasn't that interested in rostering, but when it came down to it, he's still Larry Fitzgerald versus some of these other scrubs. And, eventually they're going to want to try to get him in the end zone. That worked out in our benefit in this situation. But it was really all about Emmanuel Sanders. And Philip Lindsay was another one. He was pretty obvious why he was 2/3 owned. But, again, I played around with the captain position last. Because of what was available, I was able to put David Johnson in there. I expected a big day from him. I was wrong, dead wrong. Fortunately, Sanders and Philip Lindsay did enough that we came in money right there. But expose weaknesses. Excuse me. All right. Here is the Monday night game, my Packers versus the 49ers. This one was close, and we didn't really get into the money, I think, until the very end. Granted, I don't check until the end. But I think the late Devontae touchdown was obviously a really, really big help. Right here, this was playing Ty Montgomery, who is cheap, and Kendrick Bourne in order to get the studs that I wanted. I wasn't going without Aaron Rodgers. As you can see, everybody had him. If you didn't play Aaron Rodgers, you probably weren't winning any money. I wasn't going without Devontae Adams. He's a clear number 1 wide receiver in a game where you kind of figured Green Bay is going to throw it because they throw it every game. Jimmy Graham, much of the same thing. I wanted to make sure I got him into my roster. So after I decided on those 3 and C.J. Beathard. Now, Beathard had a good game. I expected it more because he was going to be trailing. But those were the 4 guys that I wasn't going to live without. Kendrick Bourne we even brought up. We liked him better if San Francisco was missing some of the guys that were questionable going into the game. They all ended up playing, but I figured, what the hell, I'll go with Kendrick Bourne anyways. He's had some success even with these guys in here. He only had the 1 catch. But paying down to him allowed me to get Aaron Rodgers, C.J. Beathard, Devontae Adams, and Jimmy Graham, who were the 4 guys that, in my eyes, I couldn't live without. You played Marquise Goodwin. You were in good money that night. But after playing those 4 guys, I had to play around with roster construction for a little bit. Turned out I could fit Beathard in the captain spot and then get Ty Montgomery and Kendrick Bourne. I thought about putting Bourne in the captain spot, but ultimately I had reservations on it, and I thought it was better to play Ty Montgomery and move Beathard up to captain spot as opposed to paying like a couple really, really crappy guys, because at least got me 1 more guy. And it put somebody I felt better about in the captain spot. So I hope that makes sense. All right, move back another week. All right, we got Eagles versus Giants. I thought the big point here was more people went Smallwood than Clement, which is a little bit of a surprise to me. I know the last time that they were in the same running back situation, Clement was significantly higher owned than Smallwood, but Smallwood was the guy who got the touchdown that day. And the whole point, and I brought it up on the video, to double up on both of them is they're going to split the carries right here. One of them's probably going to score, but for us to try to guess who it is really, really difficult. So I like Clement over Smallwood because he's just a better player is really what it came down to for me. So we went with Corey Clement. By putting him in the captain spot and using Smallwood, it allowed me to get the guys that I really wanted. Saquon Barkley, for example. He's a really good player. Of course, you want him on your team. Next up was Odell Beckham. He did not perform, but like what I said with Beckham, because he's got the name value, a lot of times he's going to be highly owned. I was actually shocked he wasn't higher owned on Monday. And he's a guy that in the right situation, you're scared of him ruining your day. Now, Saquon was a monster tonight, so they didn't really have much luck with Odell Beckham because of the bad blocking and just Eli Manning being relatively inept. And then we went down to Zach Ertz, which was a guy we mentioned on video. He was popular. He made a lot of sense. And the last pick is the one that made money that day, and that was Alshon Jeffrey. When trying to decide on the last pick, I looked at a few guys and I said, why am I even trying to get too cute here? When I have the money left that I have left, just pick Alshon. He is the guy most likely to have a big point total. It came through here with the 2 touchdowns. And sometimes it's okay, just default to talent. When you're trying to make a judgment call on your last guy, default to talent. That's how we did Larry Fitzgerald. That's how we ended up with Alshon Jeffrey here. But the big point to me was doubling up on the running backs. All right, so I hope that helped. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's harder to talk through this stuff than to actually do it on your own. So we do our best to try to give the advice, but it's harder than actually just playing it. I hope guys understand that. I don't know. I want to get that across, but it is really difficult to explain why it's harder. All right, so a couple of recap points. You want to pick high-priced captain guys. Early on, I was picking high-priced captain guys and then starting my lineup that way, but I would ultimately leave myself exposed because I couldn't roster enough of the good players. And then when somebody else would go off and you didn't have them and they were highly owned, you'd find yourself a little bit behind the cash line. Now I pick my base. It's normally 4 guys. It can be as low as 3 or up to 5, but I pick a base of players that I don't want to get away from. And for example, on Monday night, that was Saquon Barkley, Odell, Shepard, Matt Ryan. And I knew I was going to play Ito Smith for cap space. I didn't think you needed Ito Smith, but I knew I needed those 4 guys by my account. And the guy that was going to help me get. Once I picked the 4 guys, now I play around with my roster construct. I can supplement the most value in there with them. And take a look at everybody in the captain spot. I just want to get a lineup that I feel most comfortable with without the captain spot. To me is now a default position versus the go-to position, unless there's somebody I really, really like. And I'll harken back to that Chargers-Titans game. Once I realized there was no mid-tier value that I wanted to approach, I'm like, well, I'll just put Phillip Rivers in there. You know Phillip Rivers is going to have a decent day. I mean, that's probably the safest bet on the board of all those players. So there I was able to default to the higher price guy. But it is slate dependent. And I think the most important part is picking out the core of guys that you feel comfortable with. And oftentimes, we just brought this up, we're stuck with a conundrum. Default to who's likely to score. And I talked about like Alshon in there, Larry Fitzgerald. It's not up, but I did the same thing with Eric Ebron versus the Patriots. I believe that's what's against the Patriots when he had the 2 touchdowns. And ultimately, when you're stuck in a position, talent and likelihood to get into the end zone is where I just will default to as kind of like the tiebreaker in those situations. So I hope that gives people a better idea. I hope it helps. Like I said, it's harder to, I don't know what's the best way to put that. It's harder to explain it than it is to understand it. All right, guys, if you want to join the team, we would love to have you. Outside of that, sincerely appreciate you guys watching this morning. We'll see you in a little bit for basketball, and have a good day.